In February of 2022, Russia launched a full-scale military invasion of Ukraine. Since then, the country has been engulfed in a war of attrition that has destroyed entire communities, displaced millions, and claimed tens of thousands of lives. Entire industries have been disrupted, power grids targeted, and fertile farmlands left barren. For many Ukrainians, daily life has been reduced to a grim calculation: how to survive one more day. And yet, against the backdrop of unimaginable devastation, the country has continued to resist. Ukraine's resilience has captured the attention of the world. Its soldiers have held ground in key regions under constant assault, despite being outnumbered and outgunned. Its civilians too have shown strength, by volunteering, rebuilding, and continuing to educate children even in bomb shelters. However, international admiration and expressions of solidarity have not always translated into the material support required to sustain this resistance. As the war grinds into its fourth year, the gap between Ukraine's needs and the West's response continues to widen. In recent months, the strategic situation has grown more precarious. Since the end of Ukraine's counteroffensive in late 2023, Russian forces have gradually advanced in eastern regions such as Donetsk, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia. These gains have come at immense human cost, with Russian military casualties estimated to exceed 1 million. Despite this, the Kremlin shows no indication of altering course. Moscow appears willing to absorb almost any losses in pursuit of its objectives. For Ukraine's defenders, the situation on the ground is becoming increasingly difficult. Ammunition is scarce. Air defense systems are stretched to the limit. Personnel shortages are mounting. Morale remains high in some units but is under strain elsewhere. While Ukraine has launched successful long-range strikes on Russian infrastructure, including military air bases and rail depots deep inside Russian territory, these victories, while tactically significant, do little to shift the broader strategic imbalance. Ukraine remains critically dependent on external supplies of advanced weapons and financial aid. Diplomatic momentum is also flagging. International conferences reaffirm political support, but the delivery of actual weapons, training, and financial resources continues to lag behind pledges. While countries like Germany and the United Kingdom have increased their defense budgets, much of that spending is allocated to national rearmament, not direct support to Ukraine. Some attempts have been made to fill specific gaps. For example, Germany's plan to acquire American-made Patriot missile batteries for Kyiv, but such initiatives remain the exception, not the norm. The United States, traditionally the most important supplier of military aid to Ukraine, is now navigating political headwinds. Congressional debates over the scope and timing of assistance have grown more divisive. Former President Donald Trump, who remains a central figure in American politics, has offered a mixed set of messages, at times signaling support, at other times calling for quick settlements that would effectively concede territory to Russia. His proposed 30-day ceasefire was rejected by Moscow, but its very existence underscores the shifting tone in U.S. political discourse. Bipartisan consensus on Ukraine, once relatively stable, is now increasingly fragile. This uncertainty is noticed in Moscow. Russian leadership may believe it can wait out Western political cycles and public fatigue. That belief is not without precedent. Strategic patience, combined with incremental battlefield gains, has proven effective in other contexts. If Ukraine's allies cannot agree on a coherent long-term strategy, or if internal divisions prevent timely assistance, the Kremlin may conclude that time is on its side. The consequences of a Ukrainian collapse would extend well beyond its borders. It would represent a profound failure of Western strategy, a failure not just to support an ally, but to uphold the principles of national sovereignty and territorial integrity that underpin the international system. A loss in Ukraine would likely embolden authoritarian regimes elsewhere, potentially triggering new crises in Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, or even the Indo-Pacific. The message would be clear: military aggression can succeed if sustained long enough. NATO's credibility would also be at risk. While Ukraine is not a NATO member, its survival has become symbolically and strategically tied to the alliance's broader deterrence mission. Continued Russian aggression near NATO territory, including drone incidents in Polish and Romanian airspace, have already raised tensions. If Ukraine falls, Russia could plausibly test NATO's resolve in other areas. Deterrence, after all, depends on both capability and political will. If either is perceived to be lacking, adversaries may act accordingly. There are options available to reduce these risks, but they require greater resolve. One proposal involves deploying defensive air capabilities along Ukraine's western regions, aimed at intercepting drone and missile attacks. Another involves accelerating the transfer of surplus ammunition, armored vehicles, and air defense systems already in storage across Europe and North America. Legally and ethically, many of these steps fall well within international norms. The question is no longer what can be done, but whether the political will exist to do it. Economic pressure also remains an underutilized tool. New sanctions targeting Russian energy exports, maritime shipping, and financial transactions could increase costs for Moscow. The seizure of Russian state assets held in Western banks could fund both immediate military assistance and Ukraine's future reconstruction. To date, these measures have been discussed but not fully implemented. Meanwhile, countries that continue to do business with Russia, whether through energy purchases or arms transfers, have largely avoided consequences. Stronger diplomatic pressure, including from neutral or non-aligned nations, could help shift this dynamic. Importantly, neither a prolonged stalemate nor a Ukrainian defeat would constitute a genuine victory for Russia. The economic and human costs already borne by Russian society are profound. Sanctions have constrained growth, capital flight has intensified, and international isolation has deepened. Over time, these factors could influence internal political dynamics. But as long as the war remains framed by the Kremlin as a matter of national survival or historic destiny, change is unlikely to come from within. Any meaningful resolution will eventually require negotiation, including security guarantees and discussions about long-term European stability. However, that process cannot begin in earnest as long as one side believes it can win through force alone. The pathway to peace does not begin with compromise at gunpoint. It begins with the recognition that this war has already inflicted enormous damage, and that continued escalation will benefit no one. Ultimately, the burden of escalation lies with Russia's leadership. President Vladimir Putin remains central to the conflict's origins and continuation. Accountability, both legal and political, will be essential if any long-term solution is to hold. International justice mechanisms, including indictments for war crimes, are already in motion. But symbolic gestures must be paired with concrete action if they are to carry weight. The situation remains fluid and time is growing short. Ukraine's military endurance, while admirable, is not inexhaustible. Its people have sacrificed greatly not only for their own freedom, but for the security architecture that has kept Europe relatively stable since the end of the Second World War. That architecture is now being tested. The choices made in the coming months will shape the outcome of this war, and the future of global security. Inaction is not neutrality. It is a decision with consequences. If Ukraine falls, it will not fall alone. And the costs of that failure will be felt far beyond the battlefields of the Donbass. They will echo through capitals, alliances, and generations to come.